remote attendance, that would be membership attendance, is that she thought that would require some modification and might even be, I don't know, in conflict with the open meeting law for some reason, but remote participation would not. Again, I'm not sure.
That was kind of the guidance that I got from one of the other committees, and that they had reviewed it with town council, and that was to allow remote participation. There was sort of an adoption of it town-wide. It is permissible under open meeting law as long as it has been adopted as a
approved policy or something.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I don't know the specifics of that. Maybe
I looked into it a little bit when I was bringing this to Patrice. So I mean, I think what the AG says is that the town executive, whoever that may be, mayor or board of selectmen,
I would assume
need to approve it. That they have to approve it in a blanket fashion, so they can't say I approve it for this committee but not that committee.
Of course, yeah.
But that they also have, they do have some discretion over, how it is rolled out and so on. Remote participation versus remote deliberation, and so on and so forth. And at that point, it then falls to the committees and the committee chairs to decide whether they want to do it or not. So I think one of the confusions, I think people think that if the selectmen allow this, that it then becomes a mandate and everybody has to stream their meeting. That's absolutely not the case. It's completely at the discretion of the committee as to whether they do it, when they do it, how often they do it. There's nothing mandatory about any of it. It's just if you want to, you can. If you want to do it on for one meeting because somebody's got a childcare conflict or a work conflict, and not the next meeting, go right ahead. That's fine.
But you're starting to talk in terms of it being used for remote. What I'm calling remote attendance, you're calling remote deliberation, which frankly I think has the greatest value. But you think that falls under the rubric of existing bylaws or conventions?
So is the difference between deliberation and participation whether you're actually in open meeting?
And it's whether you remember
whether you can vote remotely, right? Whether you can actually vote.
Yeah.
So deliberate.
It's like Jim
counted the quorum.
Driving up from Harvard.
It's like Jim right now. Hi, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim is not. If we were to take a vote on something, Jim could not.
Couldn't do it.
And that would be deliberation.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's my understanding was that yes, that was something we would not yes. But I think it's conjecture at this point. I think it's probably.
Nor could Jim, I think, even really kind of.
Can't do it now.
He can't offer his opinions or thoughts
he could,
or anything.
which I think is valuable. I think that's valuable.
I agree.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, again, business of the town is largely done by volunteer committees and elected committees. And
so I don't think there's a dispute there, right? It's more about
logistics. What do we need to do at this point?
Right. What do we do next, right? Because I think we've all agreed that this is an idea that has merit.
Absolutely.
That there's value in doing it, but the rules prohibit us from doing it, right? And so we've been sort of experimenting with the edge so that we can have that conversation, provide the selectmen with the advice that, it's possible, technology makes it easy, hence, we should pilot this or at least have some sort of a way to enable this.
So I think we're in the toe in the water phase with the town right now, with the clerk and the town administrator, who I think particularly town administrator is, eager to move forward with something like this. So I think the next 3 to 6 months is about bringing this to meetings and working with BMC to work out the kind of everything from the getting set up, finding the volunteers, custodianship of the.
But ultimately, we need the selectmen to bless it, right?
We do.
So I would say, in the next 3 to 6 months, what we should really aim for is for them to write something that says this is now.
I agree.
I think if we can get a meeting, if we can in the next 3 to 6 months have this deployed at a meeting, whether it's planning, school committee, and have people be able to join remotely, pose questions to the committee.
Well, they can't do it if that's.
No, the public can, just not committee members.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
Have the public participate, ask questions, have the committee be able to field those questions and respond, and have the wheels not fall off the cart, or trolls besiege the meeting and moon everybody or whatever people are worried about, then and sort of bring that to the selectmen, then I think they'll say, this is good, let's go forward. And onward.
One thing I want to bring forward here, though, we need to be very careful with our definitions, because deliberation means more than voting. It's a much wider activity. So certainly having people vote remotely, that's one possible question. But deliberation, remember all the problems we had with email and doing anything resembling deliberation. We weren't voting on any motions, but we were preparing, we were discussing business of the committee, essentially preparing motions to be voted upon later.
Yeah.
And that, it gets us into a gray area.
Well,
No, not really.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure I agree, Dan, because as much as I think we should be able to do the email transfers and maybe even come to some conclusions, that isn't in open meeting, whereas this would be an open meeting,
Well,
I think.
I'm not trying to get it to put a particular position forward here. I'm just trying to say that when we're talking about what deliberation is, it includes things besides voting. So
Sure, I mean,
so
absolutely. I mean, if, for instance, Jim from his car wanted to present a case for a particular issue that we're discussing, of course, he should be free to do that, in my opinion, as well as vote maybe on the approval of that issue. Discussion.
I did want to make a comment, but I'm not sure whether that's deliberating or participating or neither.
Go ahead, Jim.
So my suggestion was I don't think the ITAC has the legal expertise to accurately describe what's permitted and what's not permitted. And I'm wondering if, as part of moving forward, we might want to create the question part of an FAQ and then submit that to the town council or meet with the town council to work with them to draft the answers part of the FAQ, because we've been talking about this issue for a long time. We are still not quite sure where the lines are drawn, so other committees will certainly have the same problem if things are not outlined accurately, and maybe that would be a good part of moving this conversation forward.
I think it's an essential part.
Yeah,
If we can't agree what we're talking about, we can't get
Right.
consensus.
What is deliberation? I don't know. Okay, well, why talk about it right now, right?
Well,
Until we have the definition.
I think Jim brought up a good question. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we've been using the term participation to be the interaction between what's going on at the meeting and a member of the general public. We've been using the word deliberation in all of its facets to talk about the ability of somebody on the committee engaging in, I'm not going to use the word participating, in speaking in and voting in the meeting. So we're just using a couple of words here.
Sure.
I don't think we've really defined them yet. But
Yeah, but I think when it comes to what's permissible and not, then we have to understand the definition, and that comes from council. And so until we get that, we can't really talk about it intelligently. I think that's the point.
Yeah, I mean, these are issues that are not new, actually. I mean, I think I think from the state's position, a device like this is no different than a speakerphone, than a speaker that would sit in the middle of the table. And you had somebody who, set up a bridge line and called in and just ran a meeting over the bridge line. So I think these are issues that came up probably decades ago that the state doesn't look at this, I think, any differently than that. And they're fairly clear on what the protocol is.
And they're not in favor of it, right?
So they are.
Or are they?
They are.
Or are they
No
evolving?
problem with it. No
Really?
problem with it. No,
Okay,
no,
okay.
no open meeting law questions,
So-
nothing. Just that the town needs to decide affirmatively that it wants to do it or not do it.
So what are next steps for us? And I think what was suggested is that we devise the questions part of an FAQ and submit that to council probably or selectmen. Or is there a better way to get there? I mean, we just need more information on what's
On the town side, all right, would it not be the town clerk who would be the person who would be delegated with the responsibility for handling the preparation of this capability, or would it be the town administrator?
Hmm.
Which one? Maybe, and that sort of
It
speaks.
would, it
to-
would really be the board, it would really be that's a good question. I mean, I think it would be the Board of Selectmen.
No, they'd have to approve it, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about the person who would be delegated to prepare
The,
things for
the
it.
town clerk, I think, really would be involved in the handling of maybe the protocol for how to advertise or promote the meeting to as part of your agenda or what have you. So that might fall to the town clerk, and then I think probably the handling of any video or audio of the meetings that is produced. I think might fall to the town
Well,
clerk.
here's where I'm going with this. In order, in my opinion, to do this effectively, it would be nice at a meeting to have the person in the town government who's going to be eventually responsible for pulling this all together to be at the meeting while we're trying to construct these questions.
I agree. One of the issues with Belmont's government is that it is extremely decentralized, and so there is no AV czar. The lines of responsibility and delegation fall across many different functions within town government, which is probably one of the reasons it's so hard to just get a clear answer on this.
There may be a fact.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. As we're talking, I'm just kind of Googling it. There are the open meeting law specifies the definition, so we can just look it up and research it, right? Probably, we probably can generate the FAQ from public.
I think in
So, yeah.
preparation for bringing this before the selectmen, I think it's not a bad idea to have thought through these issues, at least insofar as we can as a committee, and bring answers, or at least what we think are answers to likely questions, and have those prepared. I think that's a really good idea. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a distribution of meeting agenda, scheduling or procedural information or reports or documents that may be discussed in a meeting. Anyways, but it pretty much says that, it uses that definition to kind of say that's not permissible outside of an open meeting,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. It doesn't. I don't know that. Then we get into whether, is any participation in a meeting participation, or is there parts of it that are deliberation that we're concerned with, and maybe only thing that we're cared about is whether we participate or not, and participation encompasses deliberation.
Mhm.
I would think that would be, but we can figure that out more
Mm.
as we read.
Yeah, those are good questions to ask. What counts as participation?
Right. Okay, actually, look at
So, I mean, are we proposing, do we want to propose that we put together a little we had the 21st Century Government Subcommittee report out that sort of made a high level recommendation on, remote participation. But do we want to prepare something that's a little bit more down in the weeds on kind of what a rollout might look like, or what some of the issues that have come up in our committee, and kind of try and lay those out for the selectmen?
Well,
We-
I think we might be the good group to do that, but here's where I'm going. I mean, I think there's going to be more questions coming up
Hey, John.
that are going to need to be clarified by people other than us. That's where I was going,
But we're the center of expertise in this town on remote meetings. We've done
but
a
not
lot.
necessarily on the legal aspect.
Yeah, I mean, town council will, I'm sure, have issues
Well,
to
if you could
answer and
come to a
bylaw.
meeting, that would be nice too, but that's probably expensive.
Yeah.
Expensive.
Yeah.
I suppose if we have a resource that we can turn to easily after or before a meeting, that would be sufficient.
Honestly, I don't really consider this to be our purview. I mean, we've been streaming meetings for a couple of years now, and they're all on YouTube.
Streaming a meeting is different than the remote participation.
But yeah, we haven't done remote participation because we're not allowed to.
Right.
So this is kind of beyond our ken. All I can say is it's pretty easy to stream meetings, and I see that there's a big public benefit to it. It is, of course, up to the selectmen to decide whether or not they want to allow other committees, whether they want to allow committees to actually have members participate remotely, and under what
May I make a
terms.
proposal?
Yeah.
I mean, can we as a body recommend to the selectmen that they ratify the ability of committees to engage in remote participation until such time as it's proven that there is actually a problem with it? Right? I mean, that is one approach for us.
Yeah. I mean, we could do that. We could do
Yeah.
that.
Okay, in that case, what do you mean by participation? You mean by the general public, or by the general public and members of the
Remote
committee?
participation is just as defined in open meeting law.
Which is,
Remote for any public, well, I'll give you for instance on how they say in order to enable remote participation, you have to have a quorum of the body physically located in the meeting.
okay,
So no virtual quorums.
Right, members of the public who participate remotely, and all persons present at the meeting must be clearly audible to each other. So you have to have good audio. And
It also means you can't have remote participation via email or chats.
Yeah.
audibly.
Yes.
Audibly.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a good point. And then all votes taken during a meeting in which a member participates remotely must be by roll call vote, because you have to be.
okay, so far, it sounds like you're talking about members of the committee, not the general public.
Yes.
It does say members, yes, and this
Well,
is what
because
we're talking about.
There's no legal issue around members of the public.
Right.
Like if
Okay,
John Q. Public had a meeting owl that he
Right.
bought for himself and wanted to come in here to
Right.
the ITAC committee, plop it in the middle of the table and say, guess what, I'm streaming this meeting. There's nothing that's completely within their right to do that under open meeting law. They can stream every meeting of every committee in this town. And then members of the public can join that stream and, so on and so forth. It's
but what about,
completely,
acting on it in the sense that, sure, they're viewing it and they say, okay, I want to ask this question.
We already took a comment from the member of the public.
so that would be at the discretion of the chair then, who's running the meeting, to say, we're going to permit questions of the public or not.
I
So
think
they
so,
they
that's right.
couldn't then invite the internet into the meeting. That would be at the chair's discretion. But the chair can't say, if you wanted to record a meeting, stream a meeting, what have you, doesn't have the ability to say, no, I forbid you to do that. It's a public
But we do
meeting,
have executive session.
unless it's executive session.
Well, in addition, members who participate remotely may participate in executive sessions, but must state at the start of any such session that no other person is present or able to hear the discussion. Okay, so
Yeah.
so you can.
So I think what I see is maybe, we made a high level recommendation. Maybe we need a little bit more of a detailed recommendation that sort of says, we as a committee have wrestled and, tripped over and kind
Wanna
of
test
held
it.
these questions in our hands and gone over them. And here's what our experience has been. Here's where some of the, questions, pitfalls, and areas that need more clarification are. And, here's our recommendation, right? And kind of try and wrap up all these questions that we've had over the 2 years of what's allowed, what isn't allowed, what about this, what about that. I think that would be good. And then just kind of say, this is, if you want to go forward with it, we've already thought through all these issues and here's what our thoughts are.
I think so. And again, if we present it as we acknowledge that there might be problems, but we don't find them a risk at present, and we can always go back on this and revoke this
Yes.
this ability in
Yes.
the future.
And also sort of spell out, ways that you can mitigate the risk. So there are a lot of real concerns
And-
around.
And lastly, committee by committee you can determine. It's not a requirement that all committees must, but it's rather
It's an option for any committee.
Exactly.
if they
Let's
choose.
permit
That's
the option.
important. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's I prefer that approach. Let's just go for it.
Okay.
I don't know who wants to take that action.
I'm totally with you.
Uh,
And again, I think that what I heard from Ellen, the town clerk, was, can we do this with the public and knock, in the Belmont Media Center and start to sort of stand up the structure to support this and make sure that it works before we go to allowing remote deliberation. And I think, you know,
Committee by
that's
committee.
what I'm doing, right?
And committee by committee, that you can decide how you want to implement it.
Right.
Right. But at least allow us the ability to do it.
Right. I think that's
The reason I brought up the FAQ earlier is I think there'll be a bunch of technical questions, and I like Phil's suggestion. I think maybe it'll be easier, kind of to your comment earlier, Paul, it'll be easier for the town to move forward with this if maybe ITAC produced like a short document of some sort with like some how-tos in it or something to that effect, so that people don't have to figure this all out on their own.
What do you think is needed for the Board of Selectmen recommendation, though?
I think they're going to ask a lot about like how do you wire it up and how do people connect to it and things like that. So I guess
It's going to depend. It's going to depend committee by committee. For us, it's a meeting owl and a USB port, right? For something in the selectman's office or whatever, it's something else. It's for something that's in the senior center. It's something else quite different, right? As in, right? Because you can just chime in. However,
I don't think
in a larger meeting,
I don't think we have to be completely comprehensive, but maybe just suggesting a couple of examples, because I think that's going to be the area where they struggle with it. They're going to say, okay, we want to approve this, but how are people going to actually how are people going to actually execute on it in different committees? And then I don't think they're going to want to approve it with kind of without at least somewhat of a path forward for committees.
Yeah. So I think that what I was describing is kind of a small, medium, large,
The
set of setups.
there are like a constellation of different issues. There is the AV hardware issue.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I'm such a big advocate of this technology, because it's all in one. It's dead simple to set up, and it's got this kind of software-based camera person who can actually manage the capturing of the meeting. There are issues around managing the recordings and making sure that we're doing that's done in compliance with open meeting law. There are issues that people have around, trolling, and what if, people comment on somebody's dress or behavior in a way that's, hostile, or try and interrupt the meeting. And again, most of all these platforms allow you to control that, but still there are concerns about it. And then I think they're just a general kind of transparency, OML. Let's make sure we're within the letter of the law concerns.
So, I mean, you have good answers. It's clear you thought about this. I mean, what would prevent us from just getting on the agenda at a Board of Selectmen meeting? You show up, make the recommendation, and then answer their questions, rather than us trying to anticipate all their questions and create a document and spend all that time. I mean, it's not necessary. They haven't asked for it.
Right. And it might actually be,
Are you trying to save me some work or something?
I'm trying to save all of us. We're
Yeah,
get
exactly.
this done quicker rather than us,
I
why don't
agree.
we just show up for a meeting and present it, and they answer questions and we answer them.
And we can get this. We can request that it's on their agenda, and we can provide them with our recommendation in advance.
Yeah.
And then we can be at the Board of Selectmen's meeting and answer questions and have them deliberate on it there and then and there.
I think the fact makes a ton of sense for the committees who are going to have to adopt this and get into the technical weeds. But for the Board of Selectmen, we may not, they may be less skeptical of this than we think they are.
Correct.
It makes sense to just get in front of them.
And I think they'll respect our judgment on it, especially if they each know. You don't think? You don't think?
No, I agree. I'm just we're dwelling on all these technical enablement pieces, and like the
Oh no, I think what we're talking about right now is just the
getting the selectmen to sign on. Right.
Right.
They just need a simple majority vote. Right.
Right.
But the other part of it that I don't think, and we haven't quite mentioned, well, you alluded to, is there are requirements legally around how this gets sort of implemented.
Yeah, and they're not going to take our recommendations on that. So
No, but I think they may need to be aware of it, right? And so that's a sort of, like, I'm less worried about, like, is it, meeting owl or is it teleconference?
Sure,
or
sure.
what,
Yeah,
right?
no, same here.
that's, I agree. And I don't think they probably are. That's probably not their major concern either. That's why they have us, because they don't want to think about that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, but what they really need, and again, going back to Phil's point, like, they need legal counsel to make sure that we all understand this.
We think we recommend it's a good idea, and then they're probably not going to say yes at that meeting. They're probably going to say we'd like to dig into some of the legal issues and
Again,
thank you for your recommendation, and then we're done.
Or we advise them that it's going to be on the agenda, and that maybe they should give a quick legal counsel beforehand.
Okay.
Or one of the selectmen goes and does their homework, and hopefully, and then
That would be nice.
and then we have a meeting where we can make a deliberation and determination. So I don't know.
I think regardless of, I mean, I think your suggestion's really good. We're gonna have to produce some sort of a document, short document for them to look. No, I'm convinced.
I'm just saying, like,
they
let's
have-
just get this in front of them as quickly as we
Yeah,
can, and then we'll figure out what they
But
want.
you're-
So what I'm
but
hearing
what
from-
are we gonna get in front of them but a document
Yeah,
that they can
don't worry
look
about it.
at?
I write for a living.
You know, it doesn't have to be a long document.
What I'm hearing from the committee is let's move forward with this
Yes.
and make, kind of make clear asks to the selectmen to accelerate this, at least, as you said, open the door. And if there's a
Right.
problem, then we can rethink that at a later date,
Yeah.
but give openness for committees to do if they want to. And then we as a committee can be there to sort of say, here's the best practices, we've been doing it for a couple of years. Here's some things to keep in mind.
So
And I agree with you, and what I'll do is reach out to Patrice and maybe try and get on the selectmen's agenda for some time in the next month or two. And we can all go
then we can all go.
and talk about
Whoever can attend.
this obnoxious chair we have who's insisted on streaming all our meetings.
Just curious.
Yep.
This is gonna be optional for all the various committees.
Right.
What's your estimate as to what kind of take rate?
I don't think it's going to be high. I really don't.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be high.
Yeah, that's my sense. as
Well,
well.
I know of one that has had I mean, so the community path implement or project committee.
Yes.
Actually, we had some times when we could have really used remote participation. So
How large is that committee?
that's about like this one.
Okay.
A little bit longer. I mean, we a little bit bigger, but
I'll be honest with you. I think actually one of the committees that will absolutely take advantage of it is the selectmen themselves, because they're a 3-person committee, and they, I think they're all professionals. While I think they're willing to do meetings with a bare quorum of 2, I think they prefer to meet when they're all available. And if I had to guess, they will take advantage of it to loop in that guy who's, whether it's Tom who's out of town or Adam or whatever. And so I think they would, community path, and then some of the bigger committees where, like warrant or school committee, where you got a bunch of members. And, you don't have to worry so much about a quorum, but you got somebody who's like, I really want to be there, but I'm traveling or got a sick kid or something.
Right.
So
I personally would be upset to see our selectmen being in absentee, during the meeting.
But if there's
Well, there is a catch, and that's that the quorum has to be physically established.
That's
right.
Right,
Yeah.
2 people
Which is
within-
2.
Could be
Yeah.
2,
Yeah.
that's right. You
You
could
can't have
always
2.
have one selectman absent under this rule. That's right.
okay.
There's also, I'm reading a document about the law. There's only 5 permitted reasons for remote participation, and those have to be included in the minutes.
Really?
So the 5 reasons are personal illness, personal disability, emergency, military service, or geographic distance. You don't have to go into the details.
Geographic distance.
Geographic
It's always the
distance.
reason.
Kind of a default, de facto.
How far away do you have to be, Arlington?
A little bit of wiggle room in that last one.
You cannot remotely participate
So-
unless you're remote.
So we probably belabor this one enough. I think probably just that. I mean, so as far as what we do in the way of putting together the FAQ or even documents about configuration and things like that. Let's wait for the selectmen to kind of say what would they like us to move forward with, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah,
I would say.
I agree with you. Make it so.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I will follow up with that, and we'll hope to have a meeting with the selectmen some point in the next month or so.
May I put point of order?
Yes.
Well, so Jim and I actually looked through our SLA, and as
Oh, great.
that was a
Okay.
task from our previous one. I don't actually see it on the agenda, and I don't know if we want to get into it or wait till the next one,
I
or
think now is a great time to introduce that. I'm sorry I left it off the agenda.
okay. Do you mind if we discuss that now? Is that right?
That's great.
Okay. So, and Jim, I don't know the extent to which you want to chime in here, but I'll just kick it off. So, we acquired the most recent version of the SLA from the select, from Dave, right? Dave Petto. And the objective was to look through it and see, is there anything kind of covered about the town-wide cooperation around cybersecurity events or anything? And the answer is not really. There's one section on network security, so Jim and I had a conversation about it. Kind of what are our takeaways from what we're seeing. I would say, from my perspective, and Jim can check in. Sure. First, the SLA is less of a determining of service level timing and agreements. It's more of a division of labor and setting of expectations and identifying of personnel and responsibilities, right? So that's just sort of a sidebar. But the second part of it is it warrants a bigger conversation about what are we doing to cooperate townwide as far as our cybersecurity posture and participation, and how do we get more coordinated? How do we institutionalize it? It's certainly not the SLA that's covering that.
When does the SLA date from? When was the last time it was updated?
We were looking for a date. I didn't see it, but it was
Not there.
It's getting back there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
8,
That's
9
good.
years maybe.
But I'm
Something
sure
like that.
it has been revised. I can look at it again. We didn't. Jim, do you remember seeing a date? I know we were talking about it, and I don't think either one of us came up with a date on it.
I think Jim dropped off.
Oh, he did. Okay. So I can find that out. What I do know is that Dave and does update that periodically, and I think they review it. I don't know if it's annually, but they do review it periodically.
Did you get a sense from Dave whether he feels it's up to date enough, comprehensive enough to deal with this threat?
We didn't have any conversations with him beyond just acquiring it, and then.
Okay.
So, maybe 2 comments. One is, It sounds like we may not want to go too much into detail because it gets close to something that we might want to hold an exec session. But 2, it sounds like it could be something that we fold into our report on some of our exec session discussions, right?
That's Jim.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but where are you all?
Where are you?
We're in
We're in the Homer building. Sorry, we're not
He's
in
at
town hall.
Natick on the Mass Pond.
All right. We're not in town.
We're in the
hall.
Homer building, room.
Okay,
12.
thank you.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Cheers. What was the question? I missed it.
The 2 comments were just, one, we may want to
Yeah.
tailor or taper conversation.
Yeah, table.
Hold it in.
Yeah.
Exec session. 2, the suggestion was that perhaps part of the recommendation or result of our ransomware readout may be to include updates to the SLA.
I think that's good. I just wanted to report generally what we found there, and hopefully there are some follow-on conversations as
Yes.
a consequence of this.
Thank you for doing that.
Did you get the sense that Jim is coming to the
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let me see if I can find a chair for him.
Okay.
Oh, damn it. I'm going to need to jump out of the meeting here pretty soon.
Sounds like
Well,
we found a chair.
We found a chair. All right. Yeah. Hey, Charlie?
So are you leaving?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, this is probably a good time.
Also, I think we're pretty close to the end of
We
the
are. We just have updates from, so thank you for doing that, Phil. And
Yeah.
Jim. We do have some updates. Do we have updates from subcommittees?
Sure, I'll give ours. It can be super quick. So we've met once, I think, since our last meeting. So one of the things we talked about last time was we had a tentative date for doing a sort of forum for the seniors. So we did confirm that for March 24th. I believe that's a Tuesday at 115 Beach Street Center.
My birthday.
Okay. The topic the title is, I think, tips and tricks to stay safe online.
Maybe you're old enough to be enrolled at the Beach Street Center.
Turning 50. I think I'm gonna
And Dana Levitt
AARP letters.
reached out to me about a week ago asking for a little blurb, so I sent her something to
Okay.
include in the newsletter. So that's one. The other thing around the lynda.com, I think the committee is doing some research now. The objective, again, being to write up some sort of a short report on, the impact of the change and where LinkedIn is with sort of monetizing its purchase of Lynda and the impact of libraries. There have been other libraries that have been unhappy with this change in policy, and this is a request that Mary Carter had brought to us a few months ago. Our plan is, again, to sort of review what's out there and known, and then bring it together in a sort of report, and then share it back with the library for them to disseminate as they wish with their clientele, right, or their patrons. And then the third one we hadn't really done anything with, which was the whole Genius Bar idea. Although, again, we still agree it's a good idea. It's just more of a
We need to find somebody to own it.
right. And we were going to approach and speak to the folks at the Beach Center
Yes.
about that. One thing that I need to follow up with you on is just getting that, whatever that standard waiver form is from the town council or from.
Okay. Okay.
I was wondering, and you and I haven't talked about this yet, timing wise, whether it wouldn't be wise to see how the session on the 24th of March goes at Beach Street Center before we start bringing up the Genius Bar issue with us. Yeah.
Hey, here he is.
There you go.
Okay, so
So left at 1:14.
so the waiver from town council.
I'll explain to you what that is eventually.
Okay. Um,
So I'm not sure I completely agree with your last point, Charlie, that we should wait to see how things go on the 24th before we move forward with the Genius Bar. I'm not sure the audience for each one of these is really that related. That may be a different group of people.
Well, I was thinking more if we're, as I expect, we're going to rely on the personnel at the Beach Street Center to make this a success. Whether just politically, it might be wise to show that, we're in a position to do things that will benefit primarily their audience of seniors. That's all my thinking was.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. And I can see where you might disagree with that, but it's not necessarily, different audiences within the Beach Street Center. It's more to sort of appeal to the management over there and say, hey, we can do these things.
I agree with that. I misinterpreted your point as being, the same people who show up for the talk will show up for the Genius Bar, and I don't think that's true.
No, you're probably absolutely right.
I did just come from the library board of trustees before I was here, and they had mentioned, that they really like the presentations and classes. They're hoping to do more of those. So,
Great. Okay.
yeah.
You mean
We haven't.
public presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we haven't initiated another program yet, but we wanted to clear our decks of some of these other things as well. But it's not falling off. Like we know it's something that maybe could be interested.
Okay.
The last thing I would just mention, and again, we don't have to discuss it tonight, is that the subcommittee name is just kind of ridiculously long.
Oh, yeah.
So we're thinking of renaming ourselves, but we haven't really figured out what that might be.
Why don't we set up a naming subcommittee?
No, we're capable enough to propose the title for
You
our
sure?
Yeah, I
I'd
think
love
so.
to stand up another subcommittee. Naming complexity.
I think we could do that, right?
Actually,
We can do
uh,
that.
We hire branding consultant.
We could hire Brandon.
So we actually did come up with
Yeah, we did.
some names,
Yeah.
but we thought that we didn't have the authority to rename ourselves, but it needed to be something brought to the committee. So I don't know if we want to add that to this agenda and just get it.
Yeah.
or
Sure.
Take a
Do it.
stab.
Do you have them? I don't have them with me.
Um,
I'll have to probably find them.
So there were a lot of ideas rolled around, but I think we settled on community tech awareness, or CTA.
Mhm. I like that.
What were you? Remind me again?
God, I don't even remember.
It was the subcommittee on cybersecurity, public health, and technology.
I think,
Or maybe
health was the
technology.
last one, yeah, but it kept, every time we picked up something new, we kept the name got a little longer. So,
Community technology awareness. Right?
Community technology
Is
awareness.
that what you?
That's what I have in my notes here.
Yeah, CTA. That works with me. Yeah. I mean, it captures what you guys do, which is educate the community about issues related to technology.
All right.
I'm happy to vote for that one.
So I make a motion that we rename our long-winded named committee to what I just said.
Subcommittee on
Community
Yeah.
technical awareness,
community technical awareness.
subcommittee on community technical.
Is there a
Subcommittee
second
on-
on that?
Yeah, I think
CC.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, now CTA. That's
we can
great.
always change it again next.
I have nothing
Yeah,
to
no, that sounds
report.
good.
Government, 21st Century Government
Thank you.
Subcommittee has not met, but I promise I will schedule a subcommittee meeting within the next 2 weeks so we can figure out what we want to do for 2020 after a very busy 2019.
Arrived in the minutes too.
I had you, all right, so I had you
Um,
somewhere.
Charlie, do you want to just, before we adjourn, do you
Yeah, just
pick our
quickly.
next meeting, just give us a readout from the
Jonathan, this is for you, lest you
Climate.
not feel left out.
climate action meeting?
Yeah. Quick. I took the liberty, actually, this is a brief, very brief summary of what went on at the climate change workshop that the town convened in conjunction with the state, as it turns out, back on January 27th. Along those lines, I took the liberty of late this afternoon, probably late enough so that none of you could receive it and ask intelligent questions, but a file with all the presentations that went on this day-long workshop. It was about 6 hours. There's a lot of slides there, but they're easy to understand, and a lot of it is pictures and graphics. I think if you're interested in the topic of climate change and how the town may have to adapt consequences of it, you'll find it very interesting. But
Did you send this? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Did you email this already?
Yes, the doc is out there. It's,
I don't see that I got it.
I sent it out to Shadow iTech.
Okay.
It may have looked like spam or something. I don't know. I was just checking my mailbox. So I don't
I'm
remember
pretty
seeing it.
sure, I could be wrong, but I was pretty sure that I sent it to the standard Shadow iTech email account.
What time?
Late afternoon, 4:30, 5 o'clock.
4:45.
Did you get it?
I got it.
Okay,
Hmm.
so it's out there.
I was probably sitting in my.
Well, he sent it to Shadow ITAC and then named Paul and myself specifically.
All right.
So that might be why I had
Okay,
it.
all right.
And it may have gotten blocked at the Shadow ITAC level. I'm not sure.
Um,
It was a 21 megabyte file.
That's big.
What time was this at?
4:45 p.m. today.
Yeah, that would be good.
That may have been why it got blocked by the Shadow IT.
Mm.
The attachment may have been too large.
Really? Okay. Is
What
there
I
any
could do,
correction for that?
yeah, what I could do is I'll do this at home, but I could save it to a Google Drive and then share the drive, the link to the drive.
Could you do that?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. In brief, what this was is it was again, it was a meeting. They called it a workshop that ran with the name, the specific name was Community Resilience Building Workshop. And what was it? It was essentially a workshop that was convened to discuss climate change, and in particular, what the town might do to apply for a grant under a program called the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, state level program that has money to allow towns that apply appropriately to get money to, I guess what you could say, to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change. An example might be if you have a problem with your stormwater drainage system, okay, they might be able to give you money to make it better. If you're trying to think about something more environmentally oriented, like, well, what are we going to do to protect the trees because the trees get affected in storms and so on and so forth. How do we do that? Well, you might want to study that, and you could get money to do that as well. The group was fairly diverse in the sense that it had ordinary citizens like me, although I was a replacement for Jim. And that's how I pitched myself to John Marshall, the assistant town administrator who actually organized this. But once I got there and, we did this, let's go around the room and I introduced myself as a citizen, but I also said, I'm also a member of ITAC and I'm sort of representing the committee on an informal basis. So there was at least some mention of the committee in our presence there. About 30 to 35 people. Most of them were just town residents like myself, but there were a lot of town employees, some state representatives. And I don't think we had anybody from FEMA, all right? And there was a set of presentations that went over essentially this program, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, as well as climate change. Basically, what are the causes of climate change? What is the state doing to try and mitigate the effects of that? In particular, the greenhouse gas emissions initiative that's been going on for a while now, and actually, according to one graph at least, looked like it's working. In other words, they are working towards that 25% reduction in the emissions rate this year compared to what it was in 1990. And then there are also goals for 2050 and goals for the end of the century. What was the purpose of this workshop? The purpose of the workshop was really, it was part of, it was one step in a process that may lead to the preparation of a proposal by the appropriate powers that be in a town to apply for one of these action grants. All right. The amount of money was something like $130 million. What I'm not sure about from memory is whether it was $130 million over 10 years or $130 million a year for 10 years. Big difference, okay? And the workshop was more or less managed by a consulting firm that
Is that
does.
for Massachusetts or national?
Those numbers were for Massachusetts. Okay, there are bigger numbers for the federal budget, and I can't remember those, but they were a lot bigger. And this workshop was one of the steps in the process to get to a proposal, to get money from the state. Now, those funds at the municipal level really aren't speaking to mitigating the causes of climate change as opposed to the effects and consequences, okay? And our job during that session was really to prepare this, okay? And what is that? Well, that is something called the Community Resilience Building Risk Matrix, all right? And the risk matrix basically relates some of the top climate change hazards. You can see that across the top. And we figured we had a choice of, you had to select 4 out of 8. And the 8 were extreme temperatures, extreme precipitation and flooding, winter storms, hurricanes, sea level rise. You'd be surprised how that might affect Belmont. Tornadoes, severe storms and wind, drought. I thought this was sort of funny. It isn't funny to people in California, brush fires, because apparently they've identified brush fires in parts of Belmont Hill as being possible threats. But in any case, we had to pick 4 from those, and we came up with extreme temperatures. Wind is really short. Yeah, let's see. Hold on for just a moment.
While you're looking, in the presentation, it says the proposed funding, it's the proposal.
Yeah.
Just referring to what you're saying,
Yeah.
was for about 137 million annually. So up to
Okay.
$1 billion over 10 years.
For the state.
Yeah, for the state, but it's a bill, right? And there's a
Right.
funding mechanism. It looks like it deeds excise tax. I don't know what that means, but
It's a good amount of money.
They put out the broad numbers. They do not get into the details of how the money would be raised. So we selected extreme temperatures, severe storms and wind, extreme precipitation, including snow, and drought, which of course would relate to extreme temperatures. And the goal was, in filling out this matrix, was, all right, now let's define the things within the town that might be affected by these hazards.
Yeah.
And they divided them up into 3 categories: infrastructure, societal, environmental.
Yeah.
Infrastructure is pretty self-explanatory. It's things like emergency shelters, stormwater management systems, roadways. We had some discretion in establishing the list in our subgroup. There were 4 subgroups. And on the societal side, they're really talking to different parts of the population: older people, younger people, low-income homeless people. Somebody even said, well, you got to put the pets in there. There may be things that happen to them. And then finally, on the environmental side, we were speaking to parts of the environment that could be most affected by climate change: trees, rats, wetlands, birds, insects, things of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
And then we actually had to indicate where these features were located, who had responsibility for them, towns, private citizens, or both, and whether these features were really vulnerable to this or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we had to indicate, well, to counteract the effects of these hazards for this particular feature, what would we recommend doing? And in many cases, we came up with recommendations that spanned all the hazards for each of the features. Right? Now, each of the 4 subgroups came up with their own chart. And we had to pull those results and come up with basically an overall set of information that could be fit into an overall matrix. And that those round little dots that you see there actually indicate, we were the green dots, indicate our preferences of importance for these particular features and how they would be affected. I have an interest in this area. I found it fascinating. I thought it was a well-done workshop. The next step is one that actually involves the general public. They have what's called a listening session, and that means basically a public meeting where I expect they're going to put out the results of the workshop, get feedback from the general public. We were told that was supposed to occur sometime in March. I think that was sort of a hope more than a promise. And then after that, the town really has to decide to take steps as to whether they're going to prepare a proposal. to get money from the state to do certain things that will mitigate the effects of climate change for certain features. And if they're successful, then they'll get an award, and the award would be expected about a year from now. And that's, if you want more detail, it's there in great detail.
I see there's a line item on data centers. Was there anything else around like IT resilience or?
I think that was sort of an all-inclusive term.
Yeah.
It's basically, you know, if the data centers get flooded out, we're in deep trouble.
Right.
You know, and there really wasn't any great level of specificity there.
That was one of your top choices.
Yep, it was. Yeah. And actually, after this was over, we met up on the top floor, which is the same level that Dave Petto has his office on. And Dave happened to come strolling in, you know. And I must admit, I have to take some responsibility for this. We sort of had gotten something wrong on the location of those data centers. And he was going, Charlie, actually it's there rather than here. It was sort of, it was all in good humor. I think data centers are still a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the one in the Homer building is probably above the water table, but the one in the library,
Yeah, I didn't think so either. Yeah,
that's trouble.
Yeah.
It's in the basement.
My understanding is, yeah, but the most of the library is
Oh, yeah.
in floodplain.
Yeah.
I guess
one stream that runs right through it.
One of the things that's, I don't know if you want to call it sobering or scary is the sea level rise issue in Boston Harbor. And if that really becomes a problem, it's more of an effect for Cambridge than for us. And it almost did become a problem, I think, in one of the recent winter storms. There is a dam that prevents the water in the harbor from backing up into a river that connects to Fresh Pond. And if it becomes polluted with seawater, for a while, the city of Cambridge is screwed, basically, because Fresh Pond is the water.
Interesting.
So it wouldn't affect us so much, but there might be some ripple effects that would affect us. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for representing us.
It was my pleasure, actually. Truly was my pleasure.
And we'll keep an eye out for that March meeting.
Yeah, please do if people who are interested.
And thanks for sharing the slides. There's actually a lot of great content.
Do we want to, any other issues, airing of grievances?
I had a devil of a time getting here.
You did?
Well, finding it. I went to the main, town hall, whatever, and you weren't listed, right, on the whiteboard. I said, something, I recall something about the Homer building. So what came in the Homer building, marched up the top floor where I did before for occasional meetings.
Jan and I did that too.
Yeah. They said, nope, not here. And so then what I did is I went back into the building, and I went to the postings and tried to find our posting, right, paper posting, meeting. And there's lots of sift through, found it, and then got here. So
I did two trips back and forth as well to the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And I was only lucky because Phil was leaving when I was coming in, so I saw Phil in the hallway. I'm sorry.
oh, it's not your fault.
No,
No.
it's not more posted.
Yeah.
Our 21st century government report did have a piece about electronic signage and the need for us to improve how we're communicating with the public.
Or a bigger whiteboard in the lobby there across the way, that would fit more room.
Put it on the town website or something like that.
Crazy. Maybe they'll
Crazy idea.
Take a picture of the whiteboard and put it on the
Okay.
website.
Take a camera from the
Let us
webcam live.
let us pick. Is there anything that you wanted to raise for the committee before we do? Thank you. you want to pick our meeting for next month? I see there's a Board of Selectmen website review meeting on. Okay, this is actually good for the committee to know. So
should be shadow brush.
I have a thing in my, I think we're actually presenting, I think we're actually
Did you get
meeting
the
with the
email
Board of
this morning?
Selectmen on the website review on March 2nd. At least I have that on my calendar. And I'll double check that with Patrice and let the committee know. Okay? So pursuant to that issue. So how do we feel about, say, the week of the 24th, we've got that event, so we could do the week of the 16th?
Well, that event's midday.
That event is midday. Okay, so we could do the week of the 24th, or the 23rd, rather.
Yeah.
So Tuesdays are not gonna be good for me until the end of spring, I think.
That's fine. Thursday.
Wednesday, the 25th?
That works for me.
I like that thing.
It's March 25th.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, sure.
that sounds good.
How about that?
7:30?
7:30, yeah. Um, 7:30 p.m.
Will you come back?
I think Ellen and I are going to switch up. I'm the new Ellen. So she's been promoted. She's the coordinator of technology and technical services. So now I'm in the technology. So I'll be back, just not next week. Next month, probably.
So I will say to you what I said to the board, which is obviously we are a resource for you as well. So your questions or things that we might be able to help you with, if there's just shoot us an email, and put it on our agenda. And think of us as like a independent China consultancy with a lot of firepower.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Can you check your email to see if I was able to successfully forward Charlie's email about the
Sorry,
to check if I successfully forwarded Charlie's email to
I did see something just pop up from you, so.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay. So
Link to Google Drive.
Yeah, link to Google Drive. Right. Okay, great.
I
Yeah, I
can
got
send it to that.
Yeah, I just replied. Yeah.
Just made me.
So your email was right.
Slow.
I suspect it had to do with the attachment.
Size of the
Too
attachment.
large to send to a
Okay.
group or something. All right.
Does somebody want to move to adjourn?
So move.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Meeting of the February meeting of the ITAC is adjourned. End our meeting.
Jonathan, thank you for taking the notes.